All right. So I would love to hear from you guys right off the bat about the last week of practice, the homework assignment, any insights, epiphanies, questions, comments, concerns. Talk to me. Not feeling too chatty this evening, I see. So the homework was to find opportunities to bring practice into life and to practice feeling flow. And
Yeah.
someone have something they'd like to share about it? Is that you, Carl?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi, Michael. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah, it's been a really positive experience. I think I've had a lot of blocks with focusing.
Mm-hmm.
And I've found quite a bit of resistance with that, but I've noticed that when I've pushed through and I've become aware of my kinesthetics, specifically feel, and really sat with it and then gone with the flow of allowing them to come in and experience them and then noticing when they go, that I'm feeling a lot more grounded and centered and calm within me, which for me that is monumental, because this is my Achilles heel. Like this is the shit that I got to deal with, you know. So I'm seeing the results, and that's really awesome. And it's not without my challenges, but I feel like I'm making progress, which is great.
Sounds like you sure are making progress. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
It's always with challenges. That's the nature of the practice. But it sounds to me like you're developing a capacity to start to discern between the content of a moment, your emotional reactivity, for example, and the context of a moment, the ground in which you're becoming aware of whatever you're feeling.
Yeah, absolutely, actually, for sure.
And
Yeah.
so your capacity to really ground into the context, there's a liberation there.
Yeah, it feels like absolute freedom, and it feels really safe. I'm finding a safety within, I guess that's my spirit, that is that I haven't experienced for. I've never had a comprehension of it. Perhaps I have experienced it in my adult life, but it's a lot stronger than it ever was. So I can see progress, which is awesome.
Oh, that's great, Kara. I'm really happy for you. And I have a pop quiz for you. That's that safety of the spirit that you're describing. Which of the three primary skills of the meditator would you say that is?
I think it's a little bit of equanimity, because I'm not judging myself as much, but it's also clarity.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. Let me go to the judges real quick and see if we'll take that answer. You're looking for equanimity? Oh, that's okay? Okay, yeah. Yeah, good answer. You're correct.
Cheers.
Cheers to you. Anyone else have something they'd like to share, or a question that came up in the practice? Rob?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to spend 3 days with an amazing meditation and spiritual teacher recently. And it was kind of like practicing all day, which is what you've been calling us to do. And I did practice that on the lead up to that weekend. But what I've noticed is it's life-changing. It creates the opportunity for me to be constantly present, rather than presence being, something I practice, say, when I'm with my partner, or something I practice during my meditation. It's giving me the opportunity to practice all day. And these men that I was with had that feeling of being present in every moment, rather than it being something that they practice. And it was just absolutely beautiful to be in that space, but then to have the realization that I can then come and then cultivate that, and that that's what's coming from these practices. It's been a real gift in a lot of ways, like a lot of ways. So yeah, it's been amazing. I just want to add that Michael was the teacher. So, yeah.
Thanks, Rod. Yeah, retreat practice is very valuable because we get some days on days on days of practice. And even though it can be very challenging in the moment, what we find when we come away from the retreat setting is that the opportunity to practice is more and more readily available. So remember, the high bar for this practice that we've been engaging in for the past 5 weeks now is to really be running some kind of technique all the time, to always be there in the moment, to be aware of exactly what's happening, whether it's boring, whether it's pleasant, or whether it's unpleasant. And the more we can do that, the more skillful our behaviors become, the more empowered we are to eliminate recurring afflictive thoughts or emotions. It's just, it's the practice of showing up to the moment all the time, but not checking out. How many of you are starting to realize now, being in this practice for 5 weeks now every day, maybe you start to get a feel for all the times prior in your life where you just weren't really there? Yeah. So this is the practice of being here, of always being here. That's it. It's right there in the word present. What does that mean? It means you're here. And as you really soak into this practice and really, let it get into your cells, just a vibe emerges about you, quality. When you look at someone, when you're in dialogue with somebody, you're really there, and it's a nice vibe, and people dig it, and you can share that with people. So remember, this ultimately is the practice of service. And the service is very subtle. You don't have to go out there and become a meditation teacher or teach meditation workshops or anything like that. Just you being around, just you being present starts to become a subtle act of service. There's an expression that I love that my teacher shares with me from Zen Buddhism. Entering the market with arms outstretched, the bodhisattva purifies the land. And it just means you're a completely regular person. You don't have to walk around like this with your mala beads and all that stuff. You can if you want, that's cool. But you're just there. You're just in the marketplace. You're available, you're willing to help, and you have a vibe that's just uplifting the collective. So good on you, mate. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share? Okay, so we're gonna. Oh, Jimmy, your hand's up. Let me hear you. You're muted, pal. Are you in a helicopter?
Yes. I just quickly, I what I'm finding is that, and my question for you, I suppose, is what I'm trying to get to the point of, is that the feel, hear, and see meditation, and then you've got the feel rest meditation, you have the feel flow meditation that you've taught us, and then actively doing that during the day. I found myself going in between all of these in some way in the same meditation. Is that generally where we're heading towards with this technique, or is it specifically, obviously you practice those things that create more awareness? I understand that, but is that where it's going? Because that's what authentically myself, that's what it's doing. In my own meditation, it's doing them all at the same time in some way.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'm glad you asked that. So it's not necessarily a yes or no answer that I have for you.
Yeah.
what I want to encourage you to do as you deepen your practice and you start to become more capable in your practice is to allow the mind to follow the thing that's interesting. A window emerges, some kind of sensory experience, soak into it. Now, there's a caveat there. We want to avoid the tendency of channel surfing during our meditation periods. Okay, so I sat down, I put on the timer for 15 minutes. I'm doing see, hear, feel, but this is feeling pretty boring right now. So to entertain myself, I'm going to start to do feel, flow. 3 minutes go by. That's, yeah, I think I maybe feel, rest for a moment. Now back to see, hear, feel. So we're not really deepening into any one technique. We're kind of channel surfing. So I would encourage you not to do that. However, it's not so black and white. I want you to be able to organize your own practice and go after the thing in the moment that seems appealing. Just be careful that you're not just bouncing around, staying at the surface level of one technique and then jumping to another technique at the surface level and then jumping back. And really what we're doing in those moments is just trying to entertain ourselves because we're bored with the meditation.
Cool.
Sound good? So
Sounds good.
I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to leave you to answer that question yourself. Just be honest with yourself.
Excellent.
All right. And I don't even want to know why you're in a helicopter, but I absolutely love it. So the technique that we have tonight, I'll tell a little story first. And I was in Italy last year with my family. And my younger brother, I have a younger brother and an older sister, and they really are into drinking wine connoisseurs, and it's not really my thing. So we went to some vineyards, and I was watching them drink the wine, and they would make comments about it, and to me, it all just tasted like wine. Now, I say that because they have a more refined palate than I did, so the experience of drinking wine was different for them than it was for me. The technique that I'm going to share tonight requires a bit of a refined palate that you may not have yet, but I want you to work with it anyway. Me personally, working with this technique, it never really jumped off the page for me until I was able to practice on retreat. So the technique that we're going to be working with tonight is called auto walk. So basically, my teacher divides all meditation techniques into two categories: perception and expression. All the techniques that we've introduced thus far, see, hear, feel, rest, feel, flow, have been an exploration in perception. We're really sinking into the experience of perceiving and pulling it apart and getting all the subtleties of it. Now, as we start to move into the expression side, the object of our meditation starts to become motor, sensory movement, and the spontaneous quality of movement, particularly walking. For all of us, walking is something that's so ingrained, we don't have to stop and think about it. There's a bounciness that's present. There's a just happeningness that's present. But it takes a little bit of practice to sink into it, notice that it's happening. And then what emerges is this kind of feeling of being walked. And we choose to use walk as the spontaneity technique that we're going to explore because it's easy to teach and we can all do it. But can anyone think of some other examples of spontaneity in movement or even creativity in life? For example, think of an athlete that's in the zone. We all have some idea of what the zone means. It's just when someone is they've sunk so deeply into the experience of movement that there's no real self left to make the decisions. And because there's no self, they just do the right thing. No. Right.
Surfing, I've had that experience. Surfing.
Great example. So have you had the experience surfing where you're trying to think of what you're supposed to do and then you seem to get in your own way and you get stiff and you wipe out. But
Exactly.
there's some sweet waves where it's just you, but there is no you. It's just the wave, and there's this spontaneous right action that's emerging. So that's a state. That's the state that we're going for, and that's a state that can be trained. And it can be trained by just by noticing the spontaneity that is inherent in something as mundane as walking. Car, did you have a hand up? Oh, I'm sorry, you're muted. I'll unmute you.
Sorry, everyone.
Okay.
I've recently been learning a new technique of using a balance ball to practice my balancing with an aim to improve my surfing. But I feel like every part of my body and my mind needs to have so much clarity about what I'm doing at that immediate time that there isn't really any space for anything else, which has been interesting. So I've enjoyed that process.
Yeah, that's a great example, and that's a very useful. What's the word I'm looking for? That's a very useful thing you could be doing while you explore this technique. If you'd rather do something other than walk. I'm a martial artist, and martial artists will report that they kind of can feel this zone that you can fall into in a drill or in a spar or in a fight. Bruce Lee has a famous quote: "I don't hit, it hits for me." The it that he's referring to is auto or spontaneity, or just expression. Drill, you drill, you drill, you drill, you drill, and then the movement expresses itself spontaneously. You don't have to think about it. You could see this also with a great painter or poet, or even a great teacher. Have you ever been around a great teacher and there's just this bouncy quality about them? And they just seem to have the capacity just to say the right thing. And when they say the right thing, there's this subtle feeling that it's not coming from them. It's almost like they're being channeled. So on the perceptual side of the techniques that we've explored, we have see, hear, feel. On the express side, we have do, say, think. So the do that we're going to be exploring is walking. I did share last week that there are 4 quadrants that we're going to be exploring. Appreciate. So see, hear, feel is appreciate. Feel, rest is appreciate. We're learning to soak into subtle sensations that are already present. Appreciate what is. Transcend, feel, flow would be an example from the transcend quadrant. Because as we really sink into this constant feeling of impermanence that wraps itself around every sensory experience, the barrier between self and world starts to not be so solid, and there's a transcendent quality in that experience. Another quadrant that we're going to explore this evening is called express. And then finally, there's nurture. Nurture we're going to have a look at next week. So the instruction is very simple, really. What I'd like to do this evening is do a little bit of a review of all the techniques and a guided practice. And then on the tail end of that review, I think we'll all take about 6 minutes, depending on, I'll tell us exactly how long it'll be. Is everyone in a place where they are free to go outside right now? Or maybe that's not appropriate if it's a little late where you are, that's totally okay. You can just walk around your living room. We'll just have 5 minutes just so we have some time to do this technique. Given our situation here on the Zoom call, this isn't the most ideal way to teach walking meditation. It would be a little more ideal if we were in a class together, but it is what it is. So we're going to take 5 minutes to do it together, and then you can ask questions that you have. So this will be part of your homework for the coming week. So this kind of way of looking at meditation practice comes from the Zen tradition. My teacher was a Zen Buddhist monk, and in Zen, the way they structure the day is so rigid and so ritualized that, like Rod was saying earlier, like on a retreat, it creates this container that there's no real formal instruction on a Zen retreat, but the container is held so tightly that it kind of allows for this flowering of a deeper awareness. And the parallel of this auto move, auto walk within the context of Zen is in Zen, the sitting practice is called Zazen. And they go right from Zazen to what they call Samu, which is working practice. So it could be cooking or cleaning or raking the sand. But the movement, the Samu, the working period, is just as formal as a meditation as the Zazen, the sitting period. And what happens in a highly ritualized day, after living that same day for years and years and years, the Zen monastics have these awakening experiences while they're raking the sand, while they're cooking, because they don't have to think about what they're doing. They just fall into this place where they're just watching the movement happen through. So I did say at the outset that this is a bit of a subtle kind of a technique. Is anyone completely lost, or am I making sense? Okay, cool. I was worried this would be a little too, I don't know what. Like I said, I never really connected with this practice until retreat. So I just encourage you to work with it, and maybe your experience will be different than mine. At the end of the day, the whole point of this whole 8 weeks is to offer you guys a number of techniques that you can use to cultivate your own daily practice. If you choose to keep only one of them and do the same technique every day, then that's okay. You can do one of these techniques and still have a solid daily practice. But this is one of the tools I want to share with you. And for some of you, maybe it'll really resonate, others maybe not. Regardless of how you feel about it this evening, you have to do it every day for the next week. Okay? So that's about what I have to say about that. I'll get a little more clear actually on in the instruction, because I won't have too much time to talk about it during the guided meditation. So areas of focus while you're walking will be the spontaneity inherent in walking. This feeling that you don't have to think about right, left, right, left. It's just happening. It's as if you're being walked. You don't have to change your gait and walk any kind of weird and meditative, flowy way. Just walk the way you walk and notice that it's happening without you needing to think about it. The object of concentration should be motor sensation. So that is different than, say, the feeling of your feet on the floor. That would be more of a perception. For me, I find my attention being guided toward my knees and just the flowing movement of my knees and my arms. So if you can perceive that subtle motor movement that seems to be happening without any real intention on your part, then just soak into it. We'll have somewhere around 5 or 10 minutes to explore it after we go through a little review of the techniques we've done thus far. And then we'll have enough time to come back and chat about it. So are there any questions before we begin? Okay. All right. So let's everyone find a comfortable sitting position. And you can allow your eyes to close now if you like. Always a good idea to check in with the body. Just find a posture that is not too rigid and not too relaxed. Relax the face, the brow, the jaw. Feel the shoulders fall down away from the ears. Bring your attention to your breath. Just for a few breaths, notice when you're breathing in and notice when you're breathing out. You may allow each exhale just to really relax the body mind. And so to begin, we're going to soak into physical sensations, internal and external, feel space, and begin to notice any quality of rest. Feel rest technique. As you know, the internal mental labels are feel and rest. Feel serves as a metronome just to keep your attention grounded in feel space. And as you perceive any subtle quality of rest, just label it by name, allowing it to spread from a local to a global sensation. Feel rest. You could allow awareness to float freely throughout the body. You could zero in on one particular point. You have the option to focus on the entirety of the body at once, scanning the body for the quality of rest, focusing on it, allowing it to spread. If you're noticing that the thinking mind is very active, just do your best to let that play out in the background. And allow your attention to soak into feel space. And now widening our focus range to include all sensory experience, placing no restrictions on our attention, allowing attention to wander where it will, just noting and labeling where it lands, using the internal mental labels see, hear, or feel. As you know, see describes any internal visual sensation. Hear would be internal mental talk or external sound, and feel could be any physical sensation whatsoever. Additionally, any internal emotional arising. See, hear, feel. Remember the practice of recycling the reaction. Absolutely anything that is coming up is opportunity to practice with. Anything that's coming up can be pieced apart through the see, hear, feel practice. It's all grist for the mill. And once again, narrowing our focus to feel space, allowing any visual or auditory sensation to just play out in the background of our attention. Now, endeavoring to detect the subtle quality of flow and feel space. Remember, it's not that special, it's not esoteric, it's just any movement whatsoever. It could be as obvious as the rhythm of the breath, or it could be as subtle as the dance of energy on the edge of the body. Feel flow. If you notice that your attention has been hijacked by a thought, that's totally okay. Just recognize that that's happened and guide the mind back to the technique. Feel flow. And so, in a moment, we'll transition to a period of practice and movement, exploring spontaneity through a technique called auto walk. It's 41 minutes past the hour. We're going to be back in our seats at 49 minutes past the hour. Remember that your object of concentration is sensory movement, spontaneous expression. Just walk and see if you can begin to perceive the just happeningness, the spontaneity inherent in walking. If you can go outside, then go outside. If you'd rather stay inside, just walk around the living room, kitchen, bathroom. Just move and soak into the experience of walking. Back in our seats at 48. A few people got lost. Any observations about the practice? Questions? Concerns? Insights? Rod?
Like for me, there was an observation, and like I could notice something. It's almost like a thoughtless impulse that's almost intangible in the arising of the movement.
Mm-hmm.
But it's super subtle. It kind of feels like I can reach out and could barely touch it with the tiniest bit of skin on the end of my fingers. It was really hard to notice any specific arising other than there was just, I can only describe it as like a thoughtless impulse, but it's almost imperceivable.
Yeah, I would say that's a pretty accurate description, Rod. Sounds like you're on the right track. I would encourage you to keep following that thread in this week's homework. It is very subtle. It's very, very subtle. We're just really trying to soak into this spontaneous movement, the just happeningness it's so easy not to notice. It's so easy to check out of. But it's very interesting to check into. And then as we check into it, this bounce kind of emerges, and we're able to be more spontaneous. Just suddenly say the right thing, do the right thing. We're taking ourselves off the leash with this subtle practice of noticing spontaneity. Thanks, Rod. Anyone else? Anything to share at all? Did anyone feel like a total weirdo? Anyone? Yeah, Maravi?
Um,
I'm sorry, let me hear from Maravi first and then we'll check in with you,
This was a very strange meditation for me. It was quite different from what normally happens, which is noting. It felt like it was kind of in my brain, just kind of a feeling of this emotion of limbs. So that was quite nice. I liked that aspect of it. I did feel a bit robotic though after a while when I was walking. It just as if I was being controlled by something else.
Yeah, that's actually a very common report, the robotic movement. In fact, I've even heard this concept of auto referred to as the robot. We're almost somehow becoming robotic to notice our spontaneity. So it's a bit counterintuitive, but I've totally heard that said before. It's quite normal. We've all been engaged in this practice now for 5 weeks, so it's possible for all of us to do a technique like see, hear, feel, for example, while walking. Was anyone fighting the urge to do that, or just noticing that the mind was doing that? So yeah, we can all do that. That's possible to do. But for this week, I would encourage you to really try to stick to this technique. Just notice, soak into the movement, see what happens. Cara.
Yeah, I just briefly wanted to reflect that I just really enjoyed the space. The moments of space were just priceless. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, keep going. Keep practicing.
Will do.
Let that space get bigger and bigger. Good work. Adam?
I love the idea of the prompt to my attention to the knees. Completely shifted and changed my walk.
Mm-hmm.
That was very cool. Also, what I'm noticing is I think maybe I'm missing the difference between see and feel and rest and feel and flow. I find that at least what's going on with me is I need to be resting in order to be flowing. So I think there's a subtle something I'm missing. I'm hoping you can maybe speak to the differences between the two.
Yeah, before I do, could you say more about the trouble that you're having?
The trouble is differentiating the two. So I'm combining them almost. I feel that in order for me to feel like I am in a flow state, flowing, I must be at rest.
Yeah.
So, how else to say it?
I think I know what you mean. And I don't think that you're wrong. I think that with regard to the sitting practice, the capacity to feel rest is almost a prerequisite to feel flow. We have to really be able to really calm the body mind in the sitting practice and establish that global sensation of rest. From that point, in my experience, that's when the much more subtle flavor of flow starts to come online in the sitting practice. But in life, I find that flow is very readily available to me in breath practice and after strenuous exercise. So even though the body is not necessarily rested in those moments, flow is available. But in the sitting practice, I would agree with this conclusion that you're coming to, that rest is a prerequisite for flow. And I think if you really start to soak really deeply into rest, you'll notice that it has a quality of flow to it. So rest can take you there. Is it helpful for you?
Thank you.
Yep. Cool. I have time for one more question. If anyone has anything they'd like to say or comment, anything at all. So like I said, a bit of a subtle technique, but I encourage you guys all to work with it and practice and see what develops. Now you have an excuse to take a 10-minute walk every day, which is very good for your health, even if this technique doesn't speak to you. So our homework is to continue with our 10-minute formal sitting practice. You can practice see, hear, feel flow, or feel rest, whatever you choose. I would encourage you to pick one technique and stay with it for the entire sitting practice. Resist that temptation to channel surf like me and Jimmy were talking about earlier. In addition to your formal sitting practice, you're going to have 10-minute walking meditation, auto walk. And as always, you're going to continue with your background practice and micro hits as you see fit. So we're going to wrap it right there for the evening, unless anyone has any questions about the homework. All right, then I will look forward to seeing you all a week from today. And good luck. Keep going. Thank you for showing up. Good night.